Hello folks, it's the Pacer Chaser again. Welcome to another one of my videos. It's February 2023 and I'm standing in Garden Street in Grimsby, looking across to Grimsby Town Station. This is the first of two. I'm going to walk through the streets of Grimsby following the old East Lincolnshire Railway line. It was going to be a simple railway walk, but I found out quite a lot of facts about the streets I'm going to walk through. So it's turned into about 50% local history and 50% railway line. If I look along the railway towards Cleethorpes, you can see the line towards Cleethorpes just curving around to the left there. Just where it starts to curve, there was another line going off, the one we're going to follow. The East Lincolnshire Railway opened in March 1848 and it curved off to the right. It went down to Louth and then to Boston, and then from there you could get to Spalding and Peterborough, and there was a through service to London King's Cross for quite a while. Just next to me is the disused Garden Street signal box. That would have controlled the junction. It was called Garden Street Junction. There is a separate video on that on my channel if you want to check that one out. There's a bit more information about the signal box. So yeah, both the line towards Louth and the Cleethorpes line would have been double track. In fact, the Cleethorpes line, there were three tracks just along here. There was a loop off to the left hand side where freight trains could be passed by, passenger trains, etc. Before Doughty Road was built, there was a foot crossing just across near the signal box here. It was called Peppercorn Walk. It was quite a dangerous crossing. As you can see, there's virtually no visibility for trains approaching from the Cleethorpes direction, and on a windy day you wouldn't hear them either. So there were quite a few accidents between trains and pedestrians, at least one of which was fatal. So when Doughty Road was built, they closed that foot crossing, and we'll go around to Doughty Road now. So as I said, the East Lincolnshire Railway opened in 1848. It was an independent company, but whilst it was being built, both the Great Northern Railway and the Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire Railway, who ran the line through Grimsby Town onto Grimsby Docks and later Cleethorpes, they were both interested in taking over the East Lincolnshire line. They both thought it would be a good addition to their portfolio of routes. The Great Northern Railway won the battle. They leased the East Lincolnshire Railway whilst it was still under construction. So from the date of opening it was really a Great Northern line. The Great Northern provided the trains and the staff. There was no discernible difference. They never actually took over the East Lincolnshire completely. It remained a separate company, but the Great Northern leased the line until the Great Northern, the East Lincolnshire and the Great Central, which was the renamed Manchester, Sheffield and Lincolnshire, they all became part of the London North Eastern Railway in 1923. So when this line was built, there were two crossings within the Grimsby area, level crossings. There was one at Wintringham Road and there was one at Ainslie Road. The Ainslie Road one was later replaced with a bridge. We'll look at that in part 2 of the video, and the Wintringham Road one. That'll be in part 2 as well. Now the Great Northern were quite funny about anything else crossing the railway, so any new roads that were built had to go via bridges, and we'll see the remains of a few of those as we're going along. The wall on the left hand side there is the boundary wall of the railway that we're following, the East Lincolnshire towards Louth. This area that's now a car park and some 1970s houses, this would all have been quite old terraced buildings. They were demolished in the 1960s, but this is where the Peppercorn Walk crossing led from to similar streets on the other side where the multi-storey car park is. So Doughty Road was built in 1895, and when it was built, as I said, the Peppercorn Walk foot crossing was closed and pedestrians were diverted down the steps I'm about to go down. Looking across Doughty Road there on the other side, there are some almshouses, in other words homes for elderly people, and they were built in 1895 at the same time as the road. They were actually to house retired trawlermen, fishermen. Now, in 1895, if you got to retirement age as a trawlerman, you were doing very well indeed. You deserved to live in a nice modern house. It's still the most dangerous profession in the world, I believe. And obviously that's with modern health and safety and technology and things like that, which they didn't have in 1895. So yeah, if you got to retirement age, you were doing very well. So we're going to go down these steps. These were built as part of the replacement for the Peppercorn Walk crossing. So as I said, the Great Northern didn't want any more level crossings, so they had to dig the road out when they built it. The pavement on this side, as you'll see, is built up on a retaining wall. This was done for two reasons. Firstly, the underpass used to flood quite a lot, so it gave one usable pavement if the rest was flooded. And secondly, As I said, they diverted the peppercorn walkway down here. To get to road level they would have needed more steps, which would have taken more room. So they built the pavement up to make less steps. This bit of ceramic white brickwork here, this was underneath the bridge for the Louth Railway. It would have been a metal girder bridge going across the road. You can see the other abutment has been demolished. The council yard opposite was there in railway days, but the access to it was quite awkward. It was narrow and angled. It was between the abutments of the two bridges. So when the Louth line closed, which it did in 1981, the passenger service had been withdrawn in 1970 and the line beyond Louth was closed at the same time. But it remained open between Grimsby and Louth for freight traffic until 1981. The last freight ran in December 1980 and then the line closed and was taken up in 1981. But when it closed, the council bought the strip of land alongside their yard. They demolished most of the abutments so they could build a wider and less awkward access road. And then they extended the yard slightly across the rest of it. We'll see that in a moment. I'm going up there next. We'll just have a look at the Cleethorpes line bridge. Sorry, I've got Alfie the Border Collie with me as usual. He's just got me tangled in the lead again. So as I said, there were two lines across the Louth line bridge and there were three across this one. You can see the extent of the white glazed bricks again. These were put in days when street lighting was a bit rudimentary, just to make it a bit lighter under the bridge. And you can see the stone piers for the metal girder spans. The bridge has been replaced in the 1990s with this modern single track width one. The line to Cleethorpes was signalled in the late 1970s, I think it was 1978. But in the 1990s they replaced the bridge. You can see for all the digging out, it only got to 11'3" clearance, so not very high at all. And then coming under the bridge, there's these steps up. Now, this was again part of the replacement for Peppercorn Walk. I'll just go up to the top of them. Back in the day, they led into other streets similar to the ones on the other side, which were demolished in the 1960s. In this case, they were replaced with this multi-storey car park, which I quite like actually. It's a nice bit of brutalist architecture. You can see there has been an alleyway that they maintained access to, but in more recent times it's been gated off, I'm assuming to stop antisocial behaviour. So come back down to the road. There's this bit of bridge preserved next to those steps. It's part of the original metal girder bridge that carried the Cleethorpes line, and it's here to show these holes in it. They were caused by a German bomber in the Second World War. It opened fire with its onboard machine guns at the bridge. I'm guessing there was a train going over it at the time. And then next to that you've got this display board. It shows the original bridge and the Peppercorn Walk crossing. There's a bit about the metal bridge section that's preserved as well, and a bit about Doughty Road itself, and a picture of the power station that was just across. We'll see that in a moment. And then Alderman George Doughty there, the road's named after. Alfie just jumped up to sniff it. So we're going to cross the road. I'll come back under the other side. So we're coming back under the bridge now on Doughty Road. There's two plaques here. See, the more modern one's a piece of modern history because it dates from when the bridge was replaced in the 1990s, but it still mentions rail track, the predecessors of Network Rail. And then the original plaque up there just commemorating the opening of the underpass and indeed the road in 1895. So yeah, you've got the glazed bricks again showing the extent of the original Cleethorpes line bridge. Just like a better view across there of the Louth line abutment. And you've got this little access here. I'm not quite sure what this was. Looking at the concrete lintel, it looks like it might have been something from the Second World War, either a little bit of an air raid shelter or perhaps an air raid precaution warden shelter, something like that, lookout post. I'm not quite sure, but it's always intrigued me anyway as to what it was. So we just crossed the road into the council depot. Alfie's just sniffing a bush. You can see the back of the retaining wall there where they've dug the embankment out when they bought it. And we're going to go up these steps. Slightly closer view of the almshouses there. So these steps lead up to an alleyway called Gas Alley, and it's called that because it used to go past the gasworks. I'll show you where that was in a moment. See, they've cracked the brickwork there where they've taken the railway embankment off the other side of it. Again, this fence is a modern fence, but it follows the alignment of the railway boundary fence. And then we're just heading into Gas Alley itself. Off to the right there, going across left to right, you can see Moss Road. That's where the power station was. It was variously known as Moss Road or Doughty Road power station. The building you see at the back of there, that was the boundary of the railway. So it would have backed straight onto the railway line. Beyond that was the original council yard. The land in front of it here is one of the bits that they bought and then extended the council yard across. You can see a little bit of hardcore still on the ground. That's part of the original foundation of the railway. On top of that would have been the ballast, in other words the stones that support the track, and then the track itself. And then across the other side there's the electrical switching station that's on the site of the power station. You'll notice this is quite sharply curved for a railway line. The reason for that, it was an afterthought. At the time the railway was being built in the 1840s, it was proposed to build a central station in Grimsby and to close Grimsby Town and Grimsby Docks stations. The central station would have been, for anybody who knows the area, where Tesco's and Asda's are between Freeman Street and Victoria Street. For anybody who doesn't know the area, it'd been more or less diagonally across there. So if you go across that way, it was in the distance over there. When the railway was approaching completion, as I say, it was opened in 1848, it became obvious that nothing was happening about the central station. So they hastily built this curve round into Grimsby Town Station to get the passenger trains into there. There was a triangle of lines. The Cleethorpes line ran along one side of it, the line we're following ran along another side, and then the third side was a much more gently curved line that came off the Louth line, and it went across basically the front of where B&Q now is. The far side of B&Q, which you can just about see some other buildings, there was a goods depot, so it served that, and it joined onto the Cleethorpes line at Pasture Street Junction, and so you could get from Cleethorpes and Grimsby Docks directly round to Louth. As I say, that was more gently curved because it was supposed to be the main line, but the central station never did get built. It's interesting to speculate what would have happened if it had been, because Grimsby from the second half of the 19th century had basically two town centres. There was the original one that dates back to medieval times, on which Grimsby Town is on the edge of, and that's still the modern town centre, known as Top Town locally. But then when the East Marsh area was built in the 1860s, they developed their own town centre along Freeman Street, which was known as Bottom Town. Now the central station would have been in Bottom Town, so presumably the main centre of Grimsby would have moved that way, rather than being where it is today. And then the two lines joined each other, the bit from Grimsby Town that we've followed and the bit round from Pasture Street Junction. There's a junction called Goods Junction. There was a signal box in between the two lines there, Goods Junction signal box. It's approximately where we're looking at now. And then there would have been a wide brick tunnel that this alleyway went underneath. The road bridge that we're coming up to is on part of the site of it, but it would have come much further this way because the two lines were joining each other and there were sidings and things. So we'd probably been walking in the tunnel right now and it would have come across. And then the railway alignment towards Louth is now followed by this road, the A16 Peaks Parkway. So we're just going through the underpass now. As we come out, the end of B&Q here on the left hand side, this is where the gasworks was that gave the alleyway its name. Now, I did a series of videos called Tramming It, where I walked along the streets of Grimsby following the old tram and trolleybus routes. And the first one of those, part one, was the Hainslie Avenue route. In that I mentioned Edward Heneage. Now, for anybody who didn't watch it, I'll mention him again. He was basically the local MP on and off during the late 19th and early 20th century. He kept losing the seat and then getting voted back in again. But he was also a property developer on quite a massive scale. And he built the entire area that we're coming into now. Basically, north to south, it's about a mile, and east to west, about the same. So it's about a square mile of properties. Most of them are terraced properties, so there's thousands and thousands of them in. The street I live on, I think you're at house 378 before you get out of the bit that Heneage developed. He also donated the land for the People's Park to Grimsby Corporation. Now, on the face of it, that was an act of kindness, of philanthropy. giving something back, but his critics, of which apparently there were many, said it was to try and increase the value of his remaining estates, because any of his houses that were near the park would go up in value. But whatever the truth, we'll never know. But the whole area that he developed, all the streets are named after either places or people that were linked to the Heneage family. So Hainton Avenue, for example, Hainton is a village near Market Raisin, where the Heneage family had their seat, the country house. And Gas Alley brings us on to Catherine Street. Catherine, we assume, was one of Edward Heneage's relatives. She wasn't his wife was Eleanor. And Eleanor's full title was Eleanor Hare of Tasborough, so she has 3 streets named after her. There's Eleanor Street at the north end of Heneage land. It goes off where Freeman Street and Hainton Avenue join each other at Hainton Square. There's also Hare Street and Tasborough Street, which are off Hainton Avenue, just along here. So there were 3 streets. He was obviously trying to keep on the good side of his wife, sensible chap. You can imagine the conversation. Have you been building them houses again? Yes, dear, but I've named another street after you. And then we turned from Catherine Street into Willingham Street. Willingham is a village near Hainton. I'm going to go along to Wintringham Road. Wintringham, I assume, is another village in the same area. It's not the one on the Humber Bank, that's Winteringham with an E. This is Wintringham without an E. But yeah, I'm assuming it's a village in the same area, and I'll see you when we get round there. So we've arrived at Wintringham Road. You can see the bridge on the site of the railway one. The railway bridge was a metal girder bridge like Doughty Road was, but it's been replaced with a modern brick one for the road. You can also see the retaining walls either side of the road to hold the pavements back. So another one, I believe this road dates from about the late 1870s, so it was after the railway was built. You can see here the retaining wall's been botched up. There were some steps up here into the car park of a club. It's now Mallard Mews, a fairly modern housing development. But the club on the site of that was really interesting. It was opened in 1912 as the Pavilion. It was a ballroom and sort of concert hall. It became the Gaiety Ballroom. It was renamed, and then in 1962 it was sold to Mecca Leisure of bingo fame. It was still a dance hall, a concert venue, but they also played bingo there. However, some of the acts that performed there were quite remarkable. They booked The Who, The Kinks, Small Faces and The Animals, just to name 4 of them. So there were some really major acts there. It's odd to think, you know, if you're pottering around in your living room of your house there, that you might be in the same place where The Who took to the stage. In the 1970s it became Tiffany's nightclub, which I think a lot of people remember it as now. And it hosted a Motown night on a Saturday night, which regularly got up to about 1,800 people, so it was quite a popular venue. But it was sold to new owners. Mecca sold it in the early 80s. It became Time and Place, and it closed in 1986, and then unfortunately it burnt down in 1988. So it was replaced with the Mallard Mews housing development that we've just seen. So we'll come to the other side of the bridge. You can see some steps up there giving access to the houses. There's a little roadway up there. We're going to go up there in a moment. And then you can see the retaining walls on both sides of the road there, and a modern addition for a wheelchair access ramp. For all the digging out, they only got 7'9" clearance on this bridge. The road under it, as you can see, is one way, but there are height restriction signs on the other side, just in case you happen to be driving the wrong way down the road. You can see by the state of the bridge, it's been hit several times. It's not lorries or double-decker buses hitting that, it's delivery vans. It seems the stereotypical white van man doesn't know how high his van is. The problem is so bad, they're talking about closing this road to through traffic, but we'll see what happens. So we're going to walk up this little roadway. Again, you can see the walls either side that they had to build. They've really done some engineering work along here. The railway was just to the right here where the road now runs. And this led up to a little walkway called Rope Walk, which is just on the left here. Unfortunately, it's become the centre of the Grimsby fly tipping industry, as you can see. So Rope Walk's just off there. It runs behind the houses on Wintringham Road down to the other end at Ainslie Street. And then this little gap nowadays is Ainslie Street Rec that it leads onto, or Ainslie Street Park as some people call it. But this was originally a cemetery. In the railway days it would have been a cemetery. There's still the remains of a pathway going off along there. That's one of the paths through the cemetery. Unfortunately, this is quite prone to flooding, so they got a bit fed up of the cemetery flooding. They thought it wasn't really appropriate, so they exhumed the people who were buried here and reinterred them in another cemetery that was drier. Again, you got remains of one of the paths there that would have led through the cemetery. And then they made it into a recreation ground, Ainslie Street Rec. In more recent times, they built these ponds, one either side of the pathway, to try and harness the wetness so you can still walk through it when it's rained. And the idea is the water now goes into there and provides a wildlife habitat. Unfortunately, it dried up in the drought of last year, 2022, and it's not really refilled yet, but I'm sure it will. Just beyond it, you can see a graffiti-strewn wall. That's the boundary wall of the railway line that ran into the power station at Moss Road, where they delivered wagons of coal. I'm just going to go a little bit further along. We normally do these videos on a Sunday morning when it's quiet, but this is Sunday afternoon. Unfortunately, I was on late at work last night, so I didn't get up early this morning. But I thought I'd come out on Sunday afternoon. So when it says there's a cemetery, there were two chapels in this cemetery. There was one here, the Church of England chapel, or roughly here anyway, and then the other one was across the way there where the children's play area is. I'm obviously not going to film that very much closer, but that was a non-conformist chapel, i.e. Anybody who wasn't Church of England. And again, you can see the wall there that would have been the boundary wall for the coal sidings into the power station. So that's it for this one. In the second part of this, I'm going to go back to Wintringham Road. I'm going to walk from there down to Wheelsby Road, broadly following the route of the old railway. Obviously the road runs along it, you can't actually walk along the road. I'm going to walk through the streets and follow the route as best I can. That will be more railway orientated rather than local history, but it will be other bits of local history as well, so watch out for that one. Please check out my other videos and please feel free to like and subscribe. So once again from me and Alfie, thank you for watching, take care of yourselves and see you soon. Bye.